Why do we feel an invisible pull toward the photos of those who have passed away? Yet often when we look at them, we feel not just love, but also an aching sadness. According to Eckhart Tolle, how we relate to images of the dead reveals something, and profound, something that goes beyond grief. It touches the very nature of our relationship with time, with attachment, and with the present moment. Have you ever felt something stir deep inside when looking at a photo of someone who's no longer here? Share your story in the comments below. There's a woman I once knew living alone in a quiet village house. Every day at noon, like a ritual, she would make a cup of tea and sit in the same chair across from the same wooden shelf. On that shelf was a single photo, her late husband, smiling on a warm summer day long ago. She'd sit there and stare at the photo in silence, the steam rising from her cup, her heart heavy. It had been over a decade since he passed. The house was quiet, but her mind was full of noise, regret, longing, memories that looped endlessly like old tapes. She said she couldn't stop herself. The photo made her feel close to him, but also reopened the wound each day. Eckhart Tolle would call this psychological time. It's not just memory. It's the mind turning the past into a prison. The mind says, he was here and now he's gone. I am alone. I miss what I had. These thoughts seem innocent, but when we believe them, we suffer. Because in that moment, we are no longer here. We are not present. We are somewhere else, trapped in a past that exists only as thought. The image itself is neutral. It exists now. But what we pour into it, our story, our loss, our resistance to what is, that's what hurts us. Tolle often reminds us, the pain doesn't come from the photo or the person being gone. It comes from our unwillingness to accept the present moment as it is. And this is one of the most radical truths in his teachings, that even in the face of death, suffering is not inevitable. It is optional. That sounds hard to believe when grief feels so real. But there is a way out, not through forgetting, not through pretending it doesn't matter, but through seeing clearly and staying present. One afternoon, the same woman decided to try something new. She didn't sit in her usual spot. She didn't pick up the cup of tea. She simply stood in the doorway, paused, and took a deep breath. She looked at the photo without thinking. No memories, no commentary, just breath, just the light on the frame. And something shifted. The pain didn't come. What arrived instead was stillness. And in that stillness, a quiet sense of gratitude. This moment, this simple act, was the beginning of healing. And this is what Eckhart Tolle means when he says, awareness is the key. When you bring awareness to something, deep, open awareness, it no longer controls you. It becomes just what it is, a picture, a memory, a ripple in the vast ocean of... Now, we will all face loss. That is the nature of life. But whether that loss becomes suffering or something more sacred depends on how we meet it, not in the mind, but in the now. There is something deeply sacred in a simple pause, a moment where no thought interferes, where no memory, no identity, no past or future creeps in to claim the moment. Just now. Just being. Eckhart Tolle teaches that this is not a technique or belief system. It is the truth of who we are beneath the surface of thought. But most people don't realize how identified they are with their minds until pain exposes it. And grief, especially the grief triggered by photos or objects from the past, is one of the strongest mirrors of this identification. When someone dies, the mind tries to hold on to whatever is left. Pictures, clothes, old messages. The mind clings, hoping it can preserve something solid. But what it is really holding on to is a story, a narrative that says, this person mattered. My connection to them defined me. Without them, I am less whole. The story might seem sentimental, even noble. but it hides fear, fear of losing our identity, fear of emptiness, fear of disappearing. Tolle's approach to grief is not cold or dismissive. It is, in fact, the opposite. He invites us to feel fully without running, but he also shows us that pain becomes suffering only when we resist what is. If you look at a photo of your late father and a sadness rises, that sadness is natural. It is a wave passing through the body. But if the mind latches onto that wave and says, "This shouldn't be, I'll never be the same, this is wrong," then the sadness deepens into suffering. One is alive, the other is a mental construct. Imagine this: you're sitting on your bed late at night, the world is quiet, you pick up a photo of your sister who passed 2 years ago, you feel your throat tighten, but instead of turning away, you place the photo on your lap and you breathe. You don't name anything, you don't label the feeling, you don't even try to be spiritual, you just stay. You notice the sensation in your chest, you notice your breath, you let the silence. Inside you rise and hold the moment gently. In that stillness you realize you are not the one grieving. You are the space in which grief appears. This is not a philosophy. It's an experience, and it changes everything. Eckhart Tolle often reminds us that death is not the opposite of life. It is the opposite of birth. Life has no opposite. Life is not the body. Life is the awareness that sees the body come and go, the photo fade, the memory dissolve. When you touch that awareness, even for a few seconds, something deep within you relaxes. You begin to see that your loved one's essence, who they truly were, is not gone. It never was an object to be lost. What you miss is form. But what you love was never form. Think of a man who lost his mother. He says, "She was my anchor, my light, my home." But when he goes deeper, he realizes something more. His mother made him feel safe, accepted, loved without condition. That feeling, that energy, can still be found, but not in the past, only in the now. The more he becomes still, the more he notices that same spacious warmth arises inside him when he closes his eyes and breathes, not from remembering, but from presence. Grief becomes sacred when it opens a portal, when it stops being about the loss of form and becomes a reminder of what is timeless. That's why Tolle teaches that the only thing you ever lose is the unreal, the surface, the role, the form. But who you truly are and who they truly were was never form. There's a moment in many people's lives when they return to an old house, a childhood home maybe, and they see the chair where their grandfather used to sit, or they find an old photo album, dusty and untouched. The mind rushes in with memories, laughter, loss, bittersweet stories. But if you stand quietly, something else can be felt. The room is still here. The silence is here. You are still here. The past didn't go anywhere. It simply collapsed into this one moment. That's the power of presence. It doesn't erase memory. It transforms your relationship to it. It allows you to honor someone's life without drowning in their absence. Tolle shares a powerful question. Can you allow this moment to be exactly as it is? This is the question to hold when looking at the photo of a lost loved one. Not to force peace, not to pretend you're not hurting, but to allow, to stop running, to sit down inside yourself and breathe. Even the heaviest grief softens in the presence of real awareness. Because awareness does not judge. It does not say, "This is wrong." It says, "This is." Sometimes when people hear this teaching, they feel confused. But if I let go of my sadness, am I dishonoring the person I lost? No, quite the opposite. When you stop resisting life, you open yourself to a deeper form of connection, one that doesn't rely on memories, images, or sorrow. You begin to feel them as part of the stillness inside you. One woman described it like this. After her daughter died, she spent years sleeping with the girl's stuffed animal. She couldn't let it go. It was a symbol, a connection. But one day, she walked into the room and without thinking, picked up the toy and placed it on the shelf. She sat on the floor, closed her eyes, and waited. At first there was pain, but then came space. She didn't see her daughter. She didn't hear a voice, but she felt a quiet love surrounding her. It wasn't coming from the stuffed animal. It was coming from within. This is what Tolle means when he speaks of going beyond form. Love is not in the object. It flows through presence, through now. So the question becomes, what are you truly holding on to when you stare at that photo? Is it the love or the story? The love can never be lost, because love is presence itself. The story, however, fades, and that's okay. Stories are not who we are. They are only clouds passing through the sky of consciousness. The more you become aware of the stillness behind every memory, the less burdened you become by the past. You begin to see clearly, without fear. You start noticing that the photo on your wall, once soaked in sorrow, now carries a different energy. It becomes a window, not into what you've lost, but into what remains eternally untouched. This awareness doesn't come all at once. It's not a technique. It's a gentle shift that happens when you stop clinging, when you stop needing things to be different, when you stop trying to fix the ache and simply rest with it. Presence doesn't mean you won't cry. It means you'll cry without drowning. You'll remember without breaking. You'll feel without becoming consumed. Even now, wherever you are, you can take a moment. Just breathe. Feel your hands. Hear the silence beneath this voice. That stillness, that is the gateway to peace. That is what Eckhart Tolle points to again and again. The space behind the pain. The awareness beneath the loss. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to get rid of the photo. You don't need to move on. You only need to wake up, to see clearly, to allow this moment to be as it is. And when you do, something beautiful happens. The past loses its weight. The photo becomes just a photo, and love remains. There's a gentle truth that begins to emerge when you stop resisting grief. It doesn't come like lightning. It arrives like a soft breeze, barely noticeable at first, but it carries something ancient, something eternal. It reminds you that pain is not the enemy. That presence is not the absence of emotion, but the ability to feel everything without becoming lost in it. A man once shared his story with Tolle during a retreat. He'd lost his brother in a car accident. The two had not spoken in years before the tragedy. The man carried guilt, heavier than grief. He looked at the only photo he had of them together and felt a tightness in his chest every time. "I never said goodbye," he whispered. Tolle listened. Then he asked one question. "Where is the guilt right now?" The man was silent. He realized the guilt wasn't in the photo. It wasn't even in the memory. It was in the now, created by thoughts in that very moment. And then something clicked. If it's created now, it can be met now, not solved, not erased, just allowed. This is the heart of Tolle's teaching. No matter what has happened, peace is still available, because peace lives in the now, not in the past we regret, not in the future we fear, but in this space right here between one breath and the next. Sometimes we think we need to do something grand to let go. A ritual, a speech, a trip to a special place. But the most powerful healing often comes in the most ordinary moments. Washing the dishes, sitting on a park bench, standing in line. If you are present, even those moments can become sacred. Try this sometime. Take a photo of someone you've lost. Hold it in your hands. And before the thoughts come, just look. Not with your mind, but with your presence. What do you feel? What happens when you stop telling yourself what should have been? What happens when you stop naming the pain and just feel the energy behind the image? You may cry, you may smile, you may feel nothing at all, but whatever you feel, if you stay present with it, it will pass through you. That is how emotions move. That is how the past releases its grip. People sometimes ask, but what if I don't want to let go? What if holding on to the pain is how I stay connected? Tolle would say, you are not letting go of the person. You are letting go of the story. The real connection is deeper than pain. In deep stillness, you might begin to sense the person, not as a character in your story, but as part of a larger field of consciousness. It's not a voice or a vision. It's a quiet knowing, a warmth, an inner stillness where they are not separate from you, but also not a part of your mind's narrative. One woman described it beautifully. After losing her father, she went for a walk in the woods. It had been months of weeping, remembering, aching, but on that walk she stopped by a tree and felt something shift. The wind moved through the branches, and she felt her father, not in thought, not in memory, but in the silence between the rustling leaves. It was as if he wasn't somewhere else, but right there, in the stillness itself. She didn't need the photo anymore to feel close. Nature became the connection. Stillness became the bridge. This is not about replacing grief with poetic ideas. It's about recognizing that true connection doesn't need form. It only needs presence. The ego mind can't understand this. The ego wants things to stay. It wants proof. It wants permanence. But life is not about permanence. It's about flow. The river doesn't stop for one stone. It keeps moving. And in its movement, it nourishes everything. So when you hold on to pain because you believe it's the only way to stay loyal to someone you love, ask yourself, is this pain rooted in truth or in fear? Fear says, if I stop suffering, I might forget them. Presence says, in stillness, their essence becomes even clearer. This is not forgetting. This is remembering differently. With open hands instead of clenched fists. When you begin to live this way, life itself becomes lighter. You carry memory, but it doesn't weigh you down. You carry love, but it doesn't break you. Even the act of seeing an old photo can shift. It no longer reopens the wound, it opens the heart. And that's what this is truly about, not escaping emotion, not denying loss, but becoming so present, so grounded in awareness that nothing has power over you, not even death. This is the radical nature of awakening. It doesn't take away your humanity, it deepens it. It reveals the sacred within the ordinary, the eternal within the fleeting, the divine within the silence. Maybe tonight, instead of scrolling through your phone before bed, you sit quietly. Just you, just your breath. You let your shoulders drop. You let your eyes soften. And you bring to mind someone you miss, not as a picture, but as a presence. You don't talk to them. You don't ask for signs. You just sit. You let the silence hold both of you. And maybe in that stillness, something opens. A tenderness, a knowing, not a memory, not an idea, just presence. That's where the healing lives. That's where the truth is. It doesn't scream. It doesn't rush. It doesn't demand. It waits quietly beneath everything. You don't have to fix anything. You don't have to be strong. You don't have to let go all at once. You just have to show up to your breath, to your body, to this moment. And if you ever forget, that's okay too. Come back again and again and again. Each time you return to the now, you come home. Not to the past, not to the photo, but to the space that has always held you. The space where grief softens into peace. The space where love is never lost. There's a quiet clarity that settles in when we stop fighting life, when we no longer resist what has already happened, when we no longer argue with the past or try to bend memory into something it was not. What remains when the mind becomes still is love. Not the kind of love that clings, not the love wrapped in stories and roles, but the love that simply is, silent, unmoving, eternal. This is what Eckhart Tolle invites us to discover, not in books or theories, but here, now, in this very moment. And perhaps that's the most powerful truth of all, that healing doesn't always require answers. Sometimes it only requires presence. You don't need to know how to let go. You don't need to figure out how to move on. Life takes care of all of that when you stop interfering and start allowing. If you've listened this far, take a deep breath with me now. Gently, softly. No need to force anything. Just notice your breath. Feel it enter, feel it leave. That's all. There is no goal, no outcome, just this breath, just this stillness. Now imagine the person you miss most. Not their face, not a photo, just the feeling of love between you and them, without the story, without the sadness, without the timeline. Let that feeling expand in the silence around you. Don't grasp at it. Don't chase it. Let it be. Let it glow like a candle in a dark room. This, too, is presence. Before you sleep tonight, consider taking a few minutes alone in stillness. Sit comfortably. Close your eyes. Bring your attention to your breath, and instead of remembering the past, allow the present moment to rise around you like soft light. Let the person you miss exist within that stillness, not as a thought, but as presence itself. Nothing more is needed. Over time, you may find that the need to revisit old photos, to cling to objects or pain, begins to fade. Not because you stopped caring, but because something deeper has awakened. A connection that no longer depends on time or memory. A peace that doesn't break when touched. And if one day you find yourself smiling softly at a photo, not because it hurts, but because it warms you, that's the sign. That's how you'll know you've begun to see clearly, not through the eyes of longing, but through the eyes of stillness. Thank you for joining me in this space. If this message touched something within you, if it brought even a moment of stillness, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. You're not alone on this journey, and if you'd like to continue exploring Eckhart Tolle's wisdom and how it applies to everyday life, consider subscribing to the channel. Each week we'll walk together into the quiet heart of presence, gently, honestly, and without judgment. Until next time, may you rest in the peace that was never far away, just beneath the thoughts, right here, right now, in the stillness that is always home.